Arcadian Vanguard presents The Wrestling News in your daily wrestling newscast for Wednesday, June 7th, 2023. Good morning, I'm Mike Sempervive. We begin today with last night's episode of NXT broadcast live on the USA Network from the WWE Performance Center in Orlando, Florida. Former NXT champion Braun Breaker closed the show by calling out WWE World Heavyweight Champion Seth Rollins, challenging him to defend his title in NXT.
I'm going to start holding everyone accountable, all the way from the top to the bottom, all right? And speaking of all the way at the top, how about our WWE World Heavyweight Champion Seth freaking Rollins? Monday Night Rollins, the workhorse of WWE. You know what? How about you prove it? Because you're pretty familiar with how we do things here. Because you were the first ever NXT champion, and I was the most dominant NXT champion. So why don't you come here and put the WWE World Heavyweight Championship on the line against me?
In the main event of the show, Thea Hale won a battle royal to determine the number one contender to Tiffany Stratton's NXT Women's Championship. Baron Corbin made his official in-ring return to NXT earlier in the night, pinning Trick Williams. This was Corbin's first match on NXT television since being called up to the main roster in 2016. Ava Raine had her first match on weekly NXT TV, joining with her Schism teammates Rip Fowler and Jagger Reed to defeat the Creed brothers and Ivy Nile in a mixed tag match. Raine picked up the win for her team, pinning Nile. In other results, Scripps pinned Dabba-Kato, Eddie Thorpe pinned Damon Kemp despite Kemp having his foot on the second rope, Blair Davenport beat Danny Palmer, and Mustafa Ali made his singles debut on NXT TV, pinning Joe Gacy. After the match, the Schism attacked Ali, but were run off by Tyler Bate and North American champion Wes Lee.
That's what he's thinking about.
Big powerbomb, and look at Ali in his eyes, realizes, sensing, there's a little bit of urgency now, is Ali.
Yes, indeed.
Back to the top rope.
Here we go.
Looking down, 450.
Wow.
Big wheel, whoa! Oh, and you knew, like the snakes they are.
The hell, they're late. They're late for the party. What were they?
Oh, Gacy holding on a 3-on-1 attack of Mustafa Ali. But there's Wes Lee, the North American champion, Tyler Bate. Returning the favor from last week, a little bop and bang.
In ratings news, Monday Night Raw drew an average audience of 1.828 million to USA Network for last Monday's episode, up more than 13% from last week's 1.611 million, according to Showbuzz Daily. The hourly breakdown was relatively steady, with Hour 1 drawing 1.827 million, which grew slightly to 1.898 million for Hour 2, then fell to 1.759 million for the final hour, marking a cumulative loss of 68,000 viewers over the course of the show. In the key 18 to 49-year-old demographic, the episode drew a .56 rating, representing 726,000 viewers, and marking an increase from last week's .52 key demo rating, according to WrestleNomics. The show came in first place for the evening on cable TV in the demo, up from fourth place last week. In National Wrestling Alliance news, NWA World Women's Champion Camille celebrated 2 full years as champion yesterday. Camille captured the title on June 6, 2021, from Serena Deeb at NWA When Our Shadows Fall in Atlanta. She remains undefeated in the NWA. Camille tweeted in commemoration of the milestone, quote, 2 years of title defenses, 2 years of continuous growth, 2 years of turning the Burke into the Brick House. Thank you all for being there for the ride, end quote. Camille is the 6th woman in the 73-year history of the title to reach 2 years as champion, following Mildred Burke, June Byers, the Fabulous Moolah, Mischief, and Jazz. And in news from Japan, So Daimonji defeated Dylan James in a match to determine the new All-Asia Heavyweight Champion on a card presented at Yokohama's Radiant Hall yesterday by the Pro Wrestling Land's End promotion. Established in 1955 in the Japanese Wrestling Association, the All-Asia Heavyweight title was originally created for the patriarch of Japanese Puresu, Rikidozan, who was the first champion and held it until his death in 1963. After the demise of the JWA, the title was carried over into Giant Baba's All Japan Pro Wrestling through the 70s and 80s and was taken over in 2017 by Land's End with permission from Baba's widow, Makoto Baba. And before we leave you today, we'd like to remind you that however you consume your content, you can find the wrestling news 24 hours a day and 7 days a week across social media. On Twitter, follow us at Wrestling News AV. Our Facebook page is also Wrestling News AV. The Wrestling News can also be found on the Arcadian Vanguard YouTube page. And for those who utilize Amazon Echo devices, just tell Alexa to play the Wrestling News podcast. And remember to make sure you add podcast at the end. Once again, for daily updates, breaking news, and more, follow the Wrestling News across social media. And that's the news for today. If anything happens, we will be here to tell you about it. No clickbait, no paywall, just the Wrestling News. The Wrestling News is a division of Arcadian Vanguard, and the Wrestling Newscast is a production of the Arcadian Vanguard Podcast Network.